Great. So as Lee said, my name's Jo Addison. I'm a trainee ACP studying with the University of Cumbria, and I'm in my final few weeks of my MSc Advanced Clinical Practice, and I've been doing this via the apprenticeship route. My presentation today will share some of my experiences as a trainee ACP, some of the challenges I've experienced, and how the programme has helped me to develop resilience in my role. So just a bit of background about me. I think one of the most interesting parts of advanced practice is the wide variety of backgrounds that advanced practitioners can have. And I'm nosy by nature, so I like to know about everyone. So I've been nursing for 19 years. And during that time, I've worked in a variety of roles, both in primary and secondary care. I started my career in trauma and orthopedics. I've worked as a ward sister in a community hospital and held more managerial posts in an acute hospital. And a common theme for me in all these roles was the frustration that progression and development generally meant losing patient contact. 6 years ago, I moved into general practice to regain some patient contact and actually to some extent rekindle my love of nursing. And in this role, advanced practice featured more highly on my radar as a way of progressing and developing while still seeing patients on a daily basis. And I embarked on my ACP journey just over 3 years ago. And now in the final few weeks of my ACP programme, I can confidently say that my experience of the role so far has really fulfilled this desire for progression that remains patient-focused. A bit of environmental context. So I work in a small rural GP surgery in the southwest of England. We only have around 3,200 patients, so it's pretty small. It's very traditional in its way of working. Think a little bit like Doc Martin. It really does feel like that some days. And this traditional way of working can be quite labour intensive and at times quite inefficient, but it does lead to excellent access for appointments for our patients and high levels of patient satisfaction. And it's also important to note that this style of practice has led to our patient demographic having very high expectations about the level of care they receive. We have quite an interesting mix of patients, a very low level of social deprivation, lots of fairly affluent retirees, lots of farmers. There are often tractors in the car park, and also quite a lot of military as we're on the edge of Salisbury Plain. And then just moving on to the team structure. So you can see from this diagram, it's a really small clinical team, and that my role whilst on the programme has been a dual one. So I've been working both as a trainee ACP and a practice nurse. And it's really interesting to note that although advanced practice is not a new concept, we're marking 30 years of advanced clinical practice at Cumbria. This surgery has never had a nurse practitioner or an ACP role, so the concept was very new to both staff and patients when I began the programme. And also just to highlight that the surgery doesn't have a practice manager. So in addition to the clinical team, you can see here, we only have a small team of 5 admin/reception staff. So thinking back to the previous point about our patient demographic, the practice operating in such a traditional way has led them to being very resistant to change. And this brings me on to my first challenge as a trainee ACP, the attitudes of patients and colleagues. So a real challenge with educating our patients about the ACP role was the fact that they liked the current system and it was working for them. From a patient perspective, there was no incentive to have an ACP to reduce waiting times because they were always able to access a same-day GP appointment, even for non-urgent complaints. However, from an organisational perspective, this was achieved by the GP partner working from 7 in the morning until 11 at night, 7 days a week, which was becoming unsustainable. And without this driver for change from the patients, there was a real challenge to encourage them to embrace the ACP role. In the early months of my time on the programme, it was common for patients to see me for a consultation and then book in to see a GP the following day for a second opinion, particularly for viral symptoms where I'd not prescribed antibiotics. And actually, we enabled this behaviour through the easy access to appointments that I previously mentioned. And this trend has gradually reduced over time. Slowly, patients have become accustomed to seeing a trainee ACP rather than a GP. And actually, the small patient population has helped this, as many patients have now undergone a consultation with me as a trainee ACP on multiple occasions. There's also, unsurprisingly, confusion created by my dual role. I might see a patient one day as a practice nurse to immunise their baby and then see them as a trainee ACP for their chesty cough the following day. And this has been a challenge for our admin team as well to understand which patients should be booked in with me. There is a well-documented risk of blurring roles within small teams, and this remains a real challenge for me. And my view would be that the ACP role works best where it can be the sole focus of the individual. The lack of experience of my supervisor with the ACP role has also been a real challenge. The ACP role is broad and complex and will present differently in different settings, and actually its versatility can be attributed to what makes it such an exciting role. However, for my supervisor, having never worked alongside ACPs or supported them in training, it was challenging to appreciate that it is a role in its own right rather than an extension of a nursing role. A particular area of difficulty in this was reluctance to allow me to manage complete episodes of care, particularly referrals. I've had to push really hard to be allowed to refer patients on and liaise with secondary care. And again, it has been difficult for my supervisor to view me as a trainee ACP when I've also been working as a practice nurse. For me, appreciating that the attitudes of others were due to a lack of understanding of the role rather than a reflection on my ability as a trainee ACP has been key in helping me build resilience and confidence. The second key challenge I've experienced as a trainee ACP is leading within a small team. And this is something that became particularly apparent during my leadership module, in which I focused on improving completion of personalised asthma care plans during asthma reviews. A previous experience in leading larger teams, and I thought somewhat naively that leading within a small team would be much easier, fewer people to engage and fewer complex relationships and personalities to consider. However, I found leading within a small team to be really challenging. With a small team, it's essential that everyone is engaged in the change process. You can't afford to have any passengers. Leading within smaller teams can also lead to risk of burnout for both the leader and the team members. Although the team may be smaller, within a general practice environment, the same roles need to be covered as within a larger practice. With staff already carrying out multiple roles, it was difficult to ask them to undertake additional work, and I haven't yet found a solution to this challenge. The small team size also proved challenging when carrying out my service evaluation, which focused on non-pharmacological management of type 2 diabetes. This involved auditing the content of diabetic reviews, and there was a strong risk that individual team members would feel that their practice was being judged. To mitigate this risk, I ensured that it was well communicated that it was a service rather than the individuals being evaluated. And finally, for this challenge, as previously mentioned, small teams can run the risk of a lack of clarity that can be caused by blurring of roles and staff undertaking multiple roles. And I found that this can lead to staff having good breadth of knowledge with a detriment to depth of knowledge. For example, I may see a patient to treat their exacerbation of asthma on one day as a TACP and then ask them to book a follow-up with the asthma nurse, who is also me. I'm also the diabetes nurse, immunisations nurse, smear nurse. You get the picture. And it's the same for our GPs too. They have to cover everything without the opportunity to specialise due to the small size of the team. And it could be argued that no one can be an expert in all these things, and therefore our patients aren't getting the benefit to their health that they could, particularly in relation to management of long-term conditions. And again, I haven't really found a solution to this, but I feel that an awareness of this potential issue can help guard against its impact when leading within a small team. And the third key challenge was team structure and ethos within the working environment. The impact of this was really highlighted to me during my service evaluation module. As part of the weekly task, I used the McKinsey 7S model to evaluate my working environment. Taking a step back from the environment that I was immersed in was a bit of a light bulb moment. I looked at what I'd written and I suddenly realised no wonder I'm finding this so hard. So you can see from the slide that both structure and style indicate challenges for a trainee ACP, with the managing GP partner providing both clinical and managerial leadership due to a lack of practice manager. And this results in the style of the environment very much being driven by only one person. Having all the direction and focus being driven by one leader can, even with the best intentions, result in a lack of collaboration within the team and in extreme circumstances lead to problems with governance, so a lack of opportunity to challenge practice. And I'm not saying that this extreme is the situation where I work, more that it's highlighted to me the benefits of a working environment where there's a more collaborative approach to leadership. For example, people taking responsibility for different areas or where there is a leadership team. I feel this can be a particular challenge for small GP surgeries where, although there is wider leadership provided externally through the PCN, essentially it is the business of the GP partners, and where there is only one GP partner, challenges to the way practice operates can feel very personal. Through applying the McKinsey 7S model, I realised that there are some things that are simply beyond my scope to change, so no amount of change theory in the world is going to alter the fact that the managing GP partner has the final say in the way the practice operates. However, just taking the time to complete this exercise and come to this realization was actually really helpful in relieving some of my frustrations and developing resilience in this area. And then just a couple of important points. I'm aware that by choosing to focus on challenges, I've probably given an unfairly negative portrayal of my place of work. But I would like to say that despite the challenges I have faced, without doubt, our patients are the primary focus of all our team, clinical and non-clinical. They get excellent care. We have very high patient satisfaction rates, and every member of staff goes above and beyond to help our patients. But I think it does also show that our areas of practice are so complicated, containing complex systems of different relationships, roles, and processes. It's not always straightforward or clear-cut, and there's always a different perspective to explore. The ACP programme, particularly the leadership and service evaluation modules, has demonstrated to me how valuable it is to take time to explore and understand the complexities of your working environment. It's not only provided me with the tools needed to overcome challenges, but where there aren't simple solutions, it's taught me the value that a greater understanding of the difficulties can bring to the ACP role. So to answer my title question, thriving or surviving, probably in reality a bit of both at the moment. However, I would like to say that over the last 3 years, most of the time it has felt like clinging on by my fingernails sort of survival. So although there's definitely more work to do in establishing my role as an ACP, I'm really pleased with the progress I've made so far. My trainee ACP journey has not always been straightforward or comfortable. However, I can appreciate that the challenges I've faced have forced me to develop resilience that I believe will stand me in really good stead for life as an ACP beyond the programme. And then just to finish, when planning this presentation and looking back on my time as a trainee ACP, I was reminded of about this time last year when I was preparing an academic poster for my leadership module. And I was explaining the concept of an academic poster to my supervisor, that it was something that could potentially be presented at a conference in the future. And their response to me was that they couldn't see a situation where I, as an ACP, would ever present at a conference. Well, here I am now presenting at a conference, and I feel that this in itself is a really good testament to the resilience I developed as a result of the ACP programme. Thank you for listening.